Hey everybody, it's Matt Shu from Upright Health.
And I'm Shane from GotRom.com. And this video is about our favorite exercises, or some of our favorite exercises for hip internal rotation. So we're going to take you through 3 exercises: a tissue work, a stretch or a hip capsule mobilization, and then a strengthening or reactivation exercise. So let's get into it.
Now you might be wondering, do I even need to work on my hip internal rotation? So let's show you a quick, simple test that you can do on yourself. It's a test that we use in the FAI Fix to help you identify whether or not your internal rotation is restricted. So what you're gonna do is just lift the leg. You're gonna be lying on your back like this. You have your leg like this. Knee is bent to about 90 degrees. And then what you're gonna do is just try to take the foot and ankle out to the side, to the outside of your knee, right? So now you can see that Shane is getting probably about 35, 40 degrees of turn here. So if this is the line here, he's gotten about 30, 35, 40-ish degrees out to the side. So that's actually what you're looking for. A lot of times you'll see people get stuck right here. If that's you, or you find that you are actually stuck in external rotation, or you just can't move at all into internal rotation, then this will be something helpful for you.
And it's worth noting that I didn't always have 30 to 45 degrees of hip internal rotation. In fact, it was more like 0 to 10. But by working on the muscles and working on the strength and the motor control, I was able to regain that range, even though in this hip, my bad hip, I have bad bone shapes, cysts, labral damage, and all that stuff. So just wanted to mention that. So the first thing to do to work on your hip internal rotation is some kind of adductor tissue work. We give lots of recommendations in a lot of videos that we make, but one of my favorites is the hip stick tool because it's the most pinpoint and gets into the attachments the best. So here's how you do it. You lay on your side, take the short end of the hip stick and put it on the attachment point of your adductors with your hand underneath this end. This is very important that you have your hand here. If you just try to go like this, you might not capture it, but if you have your hand under here, you can steer it around a little easier and you can really get those attachment points. So I'm here and I try to bring my body up and over the top like this, and I'm resting on my head and my shoulder. And sometimes it takes a little adjusting, but this allows you to get the attachment points really, really good. And then you can just kind of steer the stick around, find the ugly bits, breathe, relax. You also can move your pelvis around, change the tilt of your pelvis, anterior pelvic tilt, stick your butt out, or posterior pelvic tilt, round your back. So any of this stuff will really clear up the adductors, or where the adductors kind of stick to the hamstrings. Often they sort of get semi-adhesed. So spend 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes exploring your adductor attachment points and then retest your hip internal rotation. The next exercise is the band hip capsule mobilization. Now you can use a band to put your hip in a best fit position, but you can also use your own muscles and motor control to put your hip in a best fit position. We're going to show you the band hip capsule mobilization, but also know that training your glutes and your hamstrings and all your muscles to work in a more coordinated fashion does this as well. But this is the band hip capsule mobilization. So you're going to take a band hooked up to some immovable post or pole in the gym, and you're going to put your leg through so that the band is distracting either posteriorly, backwards, or laterally, or at some angle, either laterally or posteriorly. And then you're going to put your foot into internal rotation here and get a little distraction on the band so it's pulling your hip into a best fit position here. So I'm blocking myself into internal rotation, and then I'm putting all of my weight down through my femur so that the feeling that I get is a deep pressure in the back of the hip socket, the back of the butt here. For a lot of people, the more you drop down into hip flexion, the more likely you are to get impinged here. So in the beginning, start up tall, lean forward, and then drive all your pressure down through that femur, and then just kind of hunt around until you feel a nice deep pressure. Once you're there, just hang out, either breathing and relaxing, or tensing your muscles up and then releasing. One little extra trick is if you just can't help but feel impinged here, you might need to use your hand to twist, externally rotate your femur, or push or wiggle around a little bit to aid the band in what it's doing by pushing back here. So spend 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes tinkering with this position, and then retest your hip internal rotation. See what it does for you.
Now that you've gotten the muscles loosened up and prepared for internal rotation, we want to activate the muscles that actually create internal rotation. So to do that, we're going to do an exercise called the reverse clam. To do this, you're just going to need a block or a pillow or a cushion, and if you want to make this really fun, an ankle weight. So first, we're going to do this with just the block. We're going to stick it between the knees. And that's just getting the thighs parallel. It gets the femur basically in a neutral position relative to abduction or adduction. It's just sort of like coming straight out of the socket, right? So then what we want to do is keep a little bit of pressure on the pillow here, or the block, and then we're going to lift the foot and ankle up towards the ceiling. So that's going to create internal rotation of the femur. So Shane's just going to be firing muscles along the lateral side of the hip to turn on internal rotation in the hip joint. You can see that what we've done is told the muscles, hey, we're going to be taking the leg into internal rotation. And now we're actually using some of these other muscles to create that. So if the adductors were really stiff or the hip joint wasn't centrated enough and we couldn't internally rotate before, well, now we've created the conditions that allow for it, and that gives these muscles the ability to fire up and create this. If you want to make this even more fun and really turn these muscles on, grab that ankle weight, put it on, and continue to do the exercise. It's going to ramp that up quite a bit. Now, we've shown you this exercise in this angle with the knees basically coming closer to the chest. It's approximating the same angle that we had the hip at when we did the first internal rotation test. You should know that internal rotation also needs to happen at multiple angles, right? So one option we could use is actually just opening up that hip angle so that now Shane is in a little more hip extension and still trying to create hip internal rotation. There's multiple angles that we can work with. We could even think about elevating that, having them come out to that position. It's going to be probably quite a bit more awkward and difficult. And that just illustrates that you need to think about moving the femur, moving the hip joint in multiple angles and multiple positions. And that's why in the FAI Fix, we talk about hip internal rotation stretches and tissue work and activation exercises in multiple angles for internal rotation, for external rotation, for pretty much everything. So this is just one option that you can work on if you saw that you had trouble with the self-test that we showed in the beginning of the video. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you found those simple exercises helpful for your hip internal rotation. If you've been told you have FAI and you want a program to help you improve your hip mobility, then be sure to check out the FAI Fix.
Hope that video was helpful. Thanks to Matt from Upright Health. See you in the next video.
I guess we should how do you say it? A little bit internal rotation. I can't, you put me to shame, but at least I can get some.
This is like an Easter egg for subscribers. Like that's right. They're W sitting. I see what they did there.
Yeah, be cool, just move with the